Wake me up when September ends. Hey, wakey, wakey, Rotaractors. How's September been for you? I hope your professors didn't make your, midterm exams something along the lines of quote unquote your worst nightmare. Gosh, the only consolation I can give you guys is at least it's over now. Yeah, at least it's over now. But let's throw that in the back of our minds because it's now time to chill with Beyond Borders.
Yes, and in this season's third episode, literacy is our advocacy, in line with International Literacy Month and with the many branches of literacy. Beyond Borders focuses on a topic that is relevant but is oftentimes treated with sensitive connotation, which shouldn't be the case. Today, we will delve on an informative journey about sex education, a life skill development. I am Jessel Paderes,
And I'm Marco Paulo Lim.
your host for this episode of Getting to Know the Sexual Aspects of the Vessels Holding Our Souls. So do stay with us till the end, BB Besties.
So, attention Rotaractors and Carolinians, it's officially B.A.R months, and the official Beyond Borders team is back with a trick to kick off the start of a joyous season leading up to December. For September's Basic Education and Literacy Month, Beyond Borders Episode 3 is here to highlight the importance of a holistic education by pushing for all kinds of education, most especially for adolescents and young adults, and that is sex education. Oh, it may be juicy, but it is important.
And this might be controversial and taboo to some, but we at BB acknowledge the fact that this is an essential conversation to have and that it is important for us to create a safe space for discussions like these to pave the way for a safe and aware youth of today. Know more about why sex education matters and why it is part of a holistic educational journey for students like you and me alike by tuning in to Beyond Borders Episode 3 and 4 as we are streaming now on Spotify and YouTube. Be one of the first people to listen in on our juicy and insightful episodes 3 and 4 as soon as it drops by clicking on the notification bell in our YouTube channel. Like and follow our Facebook page for more Beyond Borders podcast episode updates and up-to-date RACCF club posts. And of course, yes, you are welcome to invite your friends or families as well. Previously on Beyond Borders Season 2's episodes titled Share the Road, done in collaboration with the Rotary Club of Banilad Metro and Cebu Road Heroes, we were able to discover more about the safety measures and emergency cues that should be observed on the road so that we can take trips with grace and ease whether we are on wheels or in high heels. And can you guys remember what we're about to talk about in this episode? I'm sure everyone will be interested and excited in today's podcast as we officially kick off the very first B.A.R month with Basic Education and Literacy Month. O, diba? Let's make this season one we never forget by keeping all the insights in it and be always in our hearts.
But first, let's have a rundown of the most important or recent news out there in Cebu. What's happening about? With the B.A.R months and Christmas countdown coming, according to Sunstar Cebu, on September 20, carolers have started to flux the street again, according to motorists and the Cebu City Police Office, and have started rescuing kids with this alms scheme in partnership with the Women and Children's Protection Desk, or WCPD, and the city's Social Welfare and Services. They will start rescuing minors who will be found caroling and begging for alms in the street as Christmas is just around the corner. This prompted the CCPO to call on the public to channel their help to a charitable institution rather to the street children in protecting them from traffic-related accidents. Police Lieutenant Colonel Maria Teresa Makatangay, Information Officer of CCPO, also urged the public to report to their station child beggars in the streets. Makatangay said that those children who will be rescued will undergo an investigation to determine who their masterminds are. Makatangay added that WCPD and the city's Anti-Mendicancy Board will coordinate with the Cebu City Police province office into the rescue operation.
On to more national news, an anti-fake news bill has been filed in the Senate. Especially in this rampant era of disinformation, legislative measures are starting to combat it. From the Philippine Inquirer's article on September 22, Senator Jingo Estrada has filed a bill which will make the creation and spreading of fake news a crime. Under Estrada's Senate Bill number 1296, fake news is defined as misinformation and disinformation of stories, facts, and news which is presented as a fact, the veracity of which cannot be confirmed, with the purpose of distorting the truth and misleading its audience. The measure seeks to amend Republic Act number 10175 or the Cybercrime Prevention Act of 2012 by including the definition of fake news and by adding fake news under cybercrime content-related offenses. Earlier, Senator Robin Padilla likewise filed a resolution pushing for an interagency approach against the influx of fake news. As fake news has been a rampant issue from even government offices, even the Philippine National Police has complained about the issue. In a survey conducted by the social weather stations last year, showed that 70% of Filipinos find fake news and its spread on the internet as a serious problem. Thus, we urge everyone to please be careful, be updated, and be safe.
Hello everyone, good day. And on this episode of Beyond Borders, we're going to talk about BB, the birds and the bees.
That is really witty, Francis. But we're not entirely going to talk about the birds and the bees. Am I right?
Oh, that's right, Marie. As Rotary and Rotaract commemorates the month of September for Basic Education and Literacy Month, Beyond Borders has decided to tackle a rather controversial topic on sex education.
You know what? I am honestly excited for this episode. Though sex education isn't exactly considered to be a branch of basic education and literacy, Beyond Borders found it significant to talk about sex education because it is a topic that is usually euphemized, and we want to shed light onto its importance, how it is a part of our life, and if we continue to deny it, it is like denying our reality.
Yes, and for this episode, we have actually invited two guests to talk about sex education. With us right now is our first guest speaker, who is a registered nurse in the Philippines and in the UK, with vast experiences in clinical and community health nursing for over 6 years, and is recognized as one of the most outstanding youth volunteers in the Visayas. He is also an advocate for sexual and reproductive health, and HIV and AIDS with local and international experience. He is also a leader of various organizations, and most of all, a proud member of the LGBTQIA+ community. With this incredible background, he is here to shed some light on the common misconceptions about sex. Let's welcome Mr. Keanu M. Arnoco.
Hello everyone, my name is Keanu and I'm here today to share awareness when it comes to sexual and reproductive health, and I'm very happy and pleased to be part of this activity with Rotaract, as this is very timely in celebration of Sexual Health September and the World Contraception Day, which will be on the 26th of September 2022, where pregnancy is wanted. That's their tagline for that. So thank you again for having me.
So once again, welcome to the podcast, Keanu. So let's hop right into the interview, shall we? So for our first question, it is really straightforward and we would love to see your take on it. So Keanu, how would you define sex education and why is it important?
Sex education, by definition, is education that promotes an understanding of sexual intercourse and reproduction. For me, though, when it comes to sex education, it's also understanding your sexuality, meeting your basic needs, prioritizing your health, preventing yourself from unwanted pregnancies, protecting yourself from STIs, and being aware of safety measures that you can apply when engaging in sex and sexual relationships. If you noticed, I highlighted about being about them, saying you. That's because sex education is mainly about you, and when I say you, it's each and every one of us. I personally believe that sex education is important because in the Philippines, there's still a taboo when we talk about sex education. We have social and religious costumes that prohibits or restricts us from having and doing this. Example with this would be religious norms, wherein we are affected at how we think when it comes to sex. So thinking about sex or doing sexual acts would then mean a sin or something that you are doing that is not okay when it comes to your religious practices. So this would then lead to misinformation and lack or inadequate sex education, which results to many different issues actually. With sex education, we will become aware and knowledgeable on how to prevent teenage and unwanted pregnancies, minimize the transmission of STIs and HIV, and reduce the number of related deaths from occurring.
I like what you said there about sex education promoting not only the understanding of sexual intercourse, I mean the act itself or unwanted pregnancies, but it also highlights the needs of the person themselves. It highlights their feelings about consent, about their feelings about that kind of concept being introduced to them. And in the context of this country, our religious norms, where, as you said, sex acts are a sin, it's not okay, and the mention of it would send people spiraling down. It actually has a lot of detrimental effects to your society. From all of the statistics that you had just mentioned, it really looks like a bleak future for our youth unless we mitigate that kind of issue. With that said, what age would you recommend introducing students to sex education and why?
So sex education should be started as early as the moment you start studying. So it depends. So sex education can be age appropriate. So that's what I'm trying to highlight for this conversation that we're having. It can be started as early as when you start education as well. It can be during kindergarten, but ideally it should be around grade school, up until high school, up until when you're taking your university days, up until even you graduate and do postgraduate studies and do your own work. So with that, sex education is best started at grade school. So this can be applied during science class, as early as simple as talking about reproductive health and how the reproductive system functions. So with this, I am actually very much in favor in the provision of basic sex education, not just in high schools or universities, but as well as in grade school.
I definitely agree with what you mentioned that sexual education should be started the moment we start studying. And so with that, Rotary and Rotaract members share a unique passion for taking action to improve communities and the world. We have quite a number of advocacies, and one that we stand for is called DEI, which means diversity, equity, and inclusion. So in your opinion, how can sex education promote diversity, equity, and inclusion in our society today?
Rotary's advocacy is similar to what we have here in the National Health Service Trust that I'm working in the UK, as we also have an advocacy on equality, diversity, and inclusion. Although for Rotary, it stands, it's DEI. What we have here is EDI. It's very similar though. I am a member of the LGBTQ plus network as well, which falls under our trust advocacy on EDI. Now, we have to understand that every individual is different and unique in their own ways. Through sex education, we will be able to highlight diversity, equity, and inclusion through SOGSE. But not everyone is aware about SOGSE, which stands for sexual orientation, gender identity, gender expression, and sexual characteristics. And by dispelling myths and misconceptions about members of the LGBT community as well, then we will be able to highlight all these three different concepts of diversity, equity, and inclusion. And first, when it comes to sexual orientation, this refers to the direction of emotional, sexual attraction, or conduct towards people of either the same sex, both sexes, or towards people of opposite sex. So these are bisexual orientation, homosexual orientation, heterosexual orientation, or even to the absence of sexual attraction, which is asexual orientation. And then we talk about gender identity. This refers to the personal sense of identity as characterized, among others, by manner of clothing, inclinations, and behavior in relation to masculine or feminine conventions. So this is when a person identifies themselves as a man or a woman, or they can be non-binary, which means they're neither of any of these gender spectrum. So they can be anything in between. And then we also have gender expression, which refers to the way a person communicates gender identity to others through behavior, clothing, hairstyles, communication, speech pattern, or body characteristics. This includes femininity, masculinity, or people being androgynous. Right. So with that, this is how you show yourself to the world, basically. And then lastly, we have sexual characteristics, and this refers to the person's physical traits, which are indicative of their biological sex. So this may involve sex chromosomes and the genitals that we have for men and women. So commonly we have penis for males and vagina for females, but we also have intersex, which means having both male and female sex organs or other sexual characteristics. So something that we need to think about is that every person, again, as I said earlier, is unique and different in their own ways, and we all have different SOGSC. SOGSC does not only apply to members of the LGBT plus community, although this is being highlighted a lot in LGBTQ plus conversations or sexual and reproductive health conversations. But again, whatever your SOGSC may be, we have to be respected and provided with services which are available, accessible, and affordable. These include free sexual and reproductive health services, such as provision of family planning commodities or contraceptives, counseling, referrals, treatment, care, and support, among many others. There are also national and local anti-discrimination laws and ordinances that are available to protect members of diverse SOGSC from discrimination, promote equal rights and programs for non-discrimination and diversity. And this also gives equal access to employment, education, and social and health services. So this is what I can highlight really when it comes to our advocacies on DEI.
I'm glad that you defined that for us. I love how you said that everyone is different, and through sex education, we can actually find that out for ourselves. You don't have to be confused all the time. What other topics would sex education shed light upon besides the birds and the bees talk?
So sex education is more than just awareness on reproduction and health risks, actually, if that's what you mean by the birds and the bees talk. But yes, for me though, sex education is more than just awareness on reproduction and health risk, as it also addresses and discusses about societal problems and issues that we have. And these may relate to women's rights, gender equality, sexual abuse on children, and homophobia and transphobia. Sex education also raises awareness about women's rights on their sexual and reproductive health. This includes access to modern family planning services, and it also promotes gender equality, reducing gender-based violence and discrimination against women. So when we talk about this, we have to think about mutual respect. They need to respect themselves. They should have that certain mutual respect with one another. By doing so, this may involve about consenting to sexual relations and practices within the couple and conflict resolutions. And when it comes to sex education, if children are provided with age-appropriate sex education, they're less likely to be victimized by sex offenders and pedophiles. This can be started in households wherein we can teach children the correct terms of their genitalia. As simple as that, really. So an example of this would be calling a male genital penis. So yes, we know that penis is somewhat appropriate in term when we say it in English, but as Filipinos, we normally call it what? Utin, right? So we should start sharing these actual terms to children. So instead of saying let's say hot dog, for example, for a penis, you can just say utin, really. And then for female genitals, instead of saying flower or cookie, you can say vagina or buto or bilat. And these are correct actual terms that we use as Filipinos when defining these or when stating about these genitals of men and women, all right, or males or females. So an example that I can share, if we don't really discuss or share with our kids what these actual terms are, is that this may lead to them being raped. I know rape is a very sensitive topic, but there's this little girl who keeps on sharing to her mother that her uncle eats her cookies. And every time that little girl shares to her mom that the uncle keeps on eating her cookies, her mom would just dismiss her, saying that, oh, it's okay, you can share these cookies to your uncle anyway, because sharing is caring. But little did we know, or little did the mom know, that the child meant the cookie as her vagina. So the uncle kept on eating her vagina, if that's how we're going to translate that to make things better understood. So that alone, the mother is already dismissing the fact that the child is being raped, which leads to future psychological problems for that child. So with that, it's really best for us to really start early when it comes to sex education, and as simple as using correct terminologies would be really helpful for the child. Members of the LGBTQ plus communities, especially the youth, are usually bullied and rejected for their diverse backgrounds, which puts them at risk of harming themselves. So with sex education, we can also help combat homophobia and transphobia by creating an inclusive and safe space for all people of diverse SOGSC. So again, when it comes to sex education, this does not only talk about sexuality and reproduction, or sex and reproduction, but it actually talks more than just that. So I hope this information sheds light or gives awareness to our listeners.
So, Kiano, that's actually really interesting, because I initially didn't think sex education discussed topics like sex education is actually more than just awareness. I never realized the amount of misconceptions people can have around this topic of sex education, and which is why talking about it can be really important, because it can clear these things up. So in terms of helping people learn about this topic, what resources would you recommend someone look into should they wish to educate themselves about it?
When it comes to sex education, the best way for you to get the correct information is to go to your nearest health center. And not just health centers within your communities, but also the teen centers and population offices that are available. So this includes offices like the Commission on Population and Development. So if you're familiar, we have that in Cebu. The one that we have is in Manila. They discuss topics relating to responsible parenthood and family planning, teenage pregnancies, as well as awareness on sexually transmitted infections and HIV. On top of the Commission on Population and Development, we also have our city health centers or community health centers that also offer these. With that, when I say correct information, by the way, these are not just the correct ways of doing things, but as well, they are evidence-based. So that's what I really want to highlight, that things or the information that is being shared when it comes to topics like these has to be evidence-based and not just experience-based. Because we know, coming from our friends, they share information about how they did sex, how they were able to protect themselves. Although some of these may be true, but it doesn't always mean it's the best and correct thing to do. So there are still a lot of information really that comes when being educated on sexual and reproductive health. And another thing, other references for us when we're seeking for information on sexual and reproductive health can also be sought in many areas actually. So it's important for us to check that educational institutions should also have these correct information. Like the clinic inside a university should also have this, or if not, the nurse should be, or the doctor in that clinic should be aware about this. So with that alone, you can also seek the correct information from them. and even more, we also have social media or online sources that we can look into. So World Health Organization is one. On Facebook, something that I like to share, you can gather more information about HIV statistics if you go to HIV Epicenter. So with that, that would also let you become aware of our current statistics when it comes to HIV and AIDS in the Philippines. What else can I add when it comes to that? So we also have many various websites that offer sexual and reproductive health information. So again, I'd like to highlight Commission on Population and Development because they have a website. We also have the Department of Health. I mentioned earlier about the World Health Organization. And aside from that, there are really more that you can check on. You can simply Google them. But again, make sure that the source that you are using is reliable.
I love that you are so thorough with all of the centers that you were recommending us, Keanu. So there are really a lot of sources for us to learn from. This is just a follow-up question and maybe me getting your opinion on why is it that with all of these centers that are supposedly going to help us, with all the organizations that are directing at it, why is it that societal issues regarding pregnancies, sex, are still prevalent in our community here in the Philippines?
For me, I believe that the reason why this is happening really is because there are still a lot of people, there are still a lot of individuals who are unaware about the benefits, the risks, the disadvantages and advantages, and what other measures they can take when it comes to their sexual health and practices. So there are still quite a lot. Like if I am doing a discussion, when I do trainings, when I do speaking engagement on HIV and AIDS or sexual and reproductive health or family planning, responsible parenthood to communities in the Philippines, there are still a lot of people who thinks that talking about these topics are funny, and they shy away from the topic. They think that this topic is not something that is commonly talked about, something that we should be ashamed of talking about. So with that, that's already a huge evidence that there are still a lack of information, or there is, if not lack, maybe inadequate, or maybe what they know, or they are just misinformed at the moment. So I always try to make sure that these information being shared to them can be understood easily and can be applied whenever they do engage in sexual relationships and sexual activities with others.
Yes, from what I understood, this kind of problem is internal. Regarding the kind of regarding the sexual education talk that we are having, most of it sometimes just rotates around straight relationships, female and male biological sexual intercourse. But how about let's try including those who aren't actually in the talk? How about the large population of that group who have their own way of doing it? Let's say for homosexual sexual intercourse, is it safe? If so, what are the safety measures for them to know about doing?
So earlier I was introduced as a proud member of the LGBTQ plus community. Thank you for that, because I am really proud to be gay. So that's something that I'd like to share first before we talk about homosexual sexual intercourse and if it's really safe. And based on my personal experiences, I would say that yes, it is 100% safe if you are, well, let's not say 100%. Let's just say 99.9% safe if you are very keen and very particular in how to keep yourself safe in such a situation. All sexual intercourse and sexual relationships can be 99.9% safe. Again, as long as you prioritize your own safety. So how can we prioritize our safety, and what are the preventive measures that we should look into? So usually when I discuss about HIV and AIDS or sexual and reproductive health in general, I always highlight the preventive measures that we have. And these include the ABCDEs of HIV prevention or STI prevention even. And this may also include other topics or other health issues when it comes to like teenage pregnancies, unwanted pregnancies, and all these unexpected events. So again, I'd like to highlight the ABCDE. So when we say A stands for abstinence. So when we say abstinence, if we can possibly delay or postpone our sexual debut, meaning if you haven't had sex ever, then try to think about it first. When the best time would you want to experience your first sexual encounter? So there may be a lot of factors revolving around that. So let's say religion. So you might say, oh, I will not have sex first until I get married. So that's one way of postponing your sexual debut. So that is one way of doing abstinence. Another thing is when it comes to B stands for be mutually faithful. So I am highlighting mutually here because when it comes to relationships, not everyone is faithful enough. So you might be faithful to that person, to your partner, but it doesn't mean your partner is faithful to you. So when it comes to ABCDEs, when it comes to be mutually faithful, you both have to be faithful with one another and ensure that you are the only sexual partners that you have. But let's say some people cannot always be mutually faithful, aren't they? So with that, we go to letter C. And letter C stands for correct and consistent use of condoms. So when we say correct and consistent use of condoms, it's not just on how you properly use a condom, it's on how you properly wear them. It's also about using the right lubrication, because when it comes to homosexual relationships, for example, or sex practices, we don't have that natural lubrication that women have. So something that I like to explain is that when women are sexually aroused, they lubricate through their vagina. But for men, for homosexuals or gay men, when it comes to us, we use our anus, right? Instead of a vagina, because we don't have that. But again, God is so great that He gave us prostate glands. So if women have clitoris as their G spot, well, that's the gay man's G spot, the prostate gland. All right. So, but unluckily though, we do not naturally lubricate on our anuses. So with that, when it comes to the correct ways of using condoms, again, aside from just putting it on properly, it's also about using the correct lubrication. So when we say correct lubrication, it has to be a water-based lubricant. It doesn't have to be oil, doesn't have to be lotion, doesn't have to be your saliva, shampoo, or whatever you can think of to lubricate things. It has to be water-based lubricant. And moreover, I mentioned as well the the consistent use of condoms. So when using condoms, you just don't have to use it one time, and then the next time you have sex, you don't use it again, and then the next time you have sex with another person, then you use. So it's not about how the person should look before you decide on wearing a condom or not, because some people find that as a factor. They would say, oh, he's handsome, it's okay, I think he's handsome, he looks healthy, I should not just wear a condom, I'm gonna enjoy the moment. I mean, it's not true to all, but it's very possible. So with that, it's best to always constantly use condoms in a correct way. So that is that for letter C. Because again, if you're unsure and if you're having multiple sexual partners, it's just really best to protect yourself. All right. And then when it comes to letter D, so this talks about do not use drugs. And when we say do not use drugs, this is not just any type of drug. Well, actually, it is any type of drug. But what I'm also trying to highlight here is about injectable drugs. Because by using injectable drugs, this would mean that you are at high risk of exposing yourself from bloodborne diseases. And this includes HIV, hepatitis B, and other sexually transmitted infections. Not all sexually transmitted infections, but these are some of those bloodborne diseases that we can get through injectable drug use. And on top of that, because I also mentioned about other drugs, right? So any kinds of drugs really, and even alcohol. Do not drink too much alcohol. That includes in letter D. So do not use injectable drugs and do not drink too much alcohol, because drugs and alcohol can impair your decision making. So it leads you to high risk behaviors, involving yourself in situations that are very risky and may lead you to either pregnancy, or having an STI. And then that's letter D. And lastly, we have education. So with this one, it's very good that we're doing this today, because when it comes to our sexual and reproductive health education, this is very important as it tackles a lot of topics, some which we already discussed earlier, but mostly when it comes to sex education, it really highlights on how you prioritize your health and safety. And one person listening to this podcast that we have now can share these valuable and correct information to others as well, and that will ripple. And each correct information that we share towards them and them being able to share it with others helps not just one person but all those people that listens. So that's that. That's why this is very important. And again, to highlight our question earlier, homosexual intercourse is definitely safe. And sex, not just with man to man, but sex among different genders, sex is safe as long as you prioritize safety. And also, to make sex way safer, you can also keep yourself tested really, like every 3 months. Testing, not just for HIV, but also for other types of sexually transmitted infections, is necessary if you're sexually active. So it's fine to be sexually active as long as you get yourself tested every 3 months. Have that regular checkup. And there are also other ways of preventing yourself from acquiring STIs and getting yourself pregnant. So one way, for example, is by using contraceptives or by taking pre-exposure prophylaxis. If you're, are you aware about PrEP? PrEP stands for pre-exposure prophylaxis. So these are medications that you can take, for example, to prevent yourself from acquiring HIV. We know that there are medications about HIV treatment, but there are also medications about HIV prevention, and this is PrEP. So as long as you're taking PrEP, the less likely of you getting HIV. So it only protects you from HIV, and ideally PrEP should be used on top of condoms to double protect yourself. And there's also PEP, so there's post-exposure prophylaxis. If you did high-risk behavior and then did not wear any protection, then within 72 hours, you can take post-exposure prophylaxis so that you can prevent yourself as well from getting HIV, or less likely get the chances of getting HIV. It's like the morning after pill for women who have sex. So this is also another available service that we provide. For example, I'm not really sure if it's being provided in health facilities generally in the Philippines, but these are also options for women who have unprotected sex. So this can provide you the chances of not getting pregnant. So that's that, if you take a morning after pill. And one last thing that you can also do to prevent yourself from acquiring STIs when it comes to homosexual intercourse, or generally intercourse as a whole, you get yourself vaccinated. So if there's COVID vaccines for COVID, there are also vaccines for STIs. So an example that I'm happy to share is that personally, I've gotten myself vaccinated for hepatitis A. One way for you to protect yourself from getting hepatitis A is actually by getting yourself vaccinated. Another way to prevent yourself from getting other STIs as well, such as hepatitis B, is by getting yourself vaccinated. And this is a bloodborne disease that can be transmitted through sexual activities as well. Another thing that I got myself vaccinated with is monkeypox vaccination. So monkeypox is not a gay disease. That's something that I'd like to highlight, but it is prevalent among the gay population, especially in from recently here in London in the UK because it's prevalent within the gay population because monkeypox is transmitted through not sex but direct contact. So example, if you are sexually active and you meet one person, share their bed, if that person that you had sex with has monkeypox, as simple as sharing the bed with them can already put you at risk of acquiring monkeypox. It is also transmitted through droplets or saliva. So the moment you kiss a person with monkeypox may expose you to the risk. So one way for me to not acquire that is by getting myself vaccinated for monkeypox as well as HPV. So we're familiar with HPV, right? It's not just for women actually. You know, HPV causing the cervical cancer. When it comes to HPVs, these are very common. Like when we see videos about raising awareness on cervical cancer, that you need to that women need to get themselves vaccinated for HPV. So if that makes sense. So with that, it's not just for women actually, but it's also for men. So men, if they get themselves vaccinated for HPV, like I did, then the less likely for them to acquire throat cancer, anal cancer, penile cancer, really. So it does not only protect women, but it also protects men as well. And genital warts. So with HPV, it reduces the chances of you acquiring genital warts as well. So there's a lot of measures really to keep sex safe. These may be new to many, and that's because, again, we do not normally and openly talk about safe sex practices in the Philippines. So hopefully with this conversation that we're having, we will be able to enlighten more individuals when it comes to sexual and reproductive health.
I like that you said that homosexual, heterosexual, and really all sexual intercourse is a 99.9% safe if you are very keen and particular in keeping yourself safe. And of course, the ABCDEs of sexual intercourse. And actually, I'd just like to ask a follow-up question also. So, masturbation is usually frowned upon, especially in our country, which is a conservative country. And it is usually known that males do them and not females. But in reality, there are females who do masturbate, or really everyone of whatever gender do masturbate. And there have been studies that say that masturbation is actually healthy. So what are the ways in which masturbation can be normalized, most specifically in countries where this is disfavored? And is it bad to masturbate if you're in a committed partnership or relationship or not?
Normalizing masturbation, I know at the moment that there's still a taboo going on when it comes to talking about sex in general. But again, if we are able to educate as early as, our childhood years, us as the youth of today, the moment we decide to have children in the future, we can always start doing sex education with these children that we have. So as simple as doing that, we can already start normalizing masturbation for the future. But in the meantime, while we're in the present, living the present, simply by discussing masturbation with your friends, it might be funny, but it's a way for you to explore yourselves. You can always discuss their experiences, what the benefits are. And again, go back to the references that I was sharing earlier. Talk to a medical professional if you're unsure about the benefits of masturbation. Second question is asking about masturbation, if it's bad if you're in a committed relationship. My answer to that is no. Even if you are in a committed relationship, again, when we talk about masturbation, it's self-pleasure. It's touching yourself, enjoying your own genitalia. And again, there's nothing wrong with that. Even if you're in a relationship with someone, in a committed relationship with them, it doesn't always mean that you have to do your sexual acts with them. It's like you have your own personal space, isn't it? You might have a boyfriend, a girlfriend, a husband and wife. You might be married, you might be in a committed relationship, but still, you do your own things. You go shopping on your own. You go to work on your own, you get to do your independent things, and masturbation is one of those independent things that you can do. It's nothing wrong. It's not something that you should be concerned of or be worried about if you do masturbate. Because sometimes giving yourself your own pleasure is the best way to meet your needs, isn't it? So again, sex is a basic need. If your partner isn't able to provide you that, well, you can always discuss it with them on how to make things better. You can always evaluate each other. But aside from that, you can also touch yourself if you need to.
So, while we are still in the topic about homosexual sex, the entire Beyond Borders team would want to ask if there are any negative health repercussions when it comes to practicing homosexual sex compared to heterosexual sex.
Comparing homosexual sex and heterosexual sex, there's not really much of a difference when it comes to negative health repercussions because sex alone has its benefits and disadvantages. So if you're having sex, may you be in a heterosexual or homosexual relationship, number one, you get the pleasure out of it, right? But also, number two, if it's being done in an unsafe manner, both you and your partner can also get health repercussions. So if it's in a heterosexual relationship, the woman can either get pregnant or can get STI. And not just the woman, but also the man can get STI. When it comes to homosexual relationships, the good thing about it is that we don't get pregnant, but there are STIs as well that puts us at risk. So again, there's no specific negative health repercussions when it comes to homosexual sex practices compared to a heterosexual sex practices. Something that I like to highlight really is just to keep yourself safe. The only thing that maybe I can share specifically when it comes to homosexual relationships is that man having sex with another man are putting themselves at higher risk of acquiring STIs compared to man to woman, because let's say, for example, if you're having anal sex, a man is having anal sex with another man, they're much more in a higher risk compared to a man having vaginal sex with a woman, because it's about the elasticity of the area where we penetrate the penis. So if you get what I mean, so if you penetrate a penis to a vagina, the vagina's elasticity is so good that it can even actually pop a baby out. So less likely of it to have abrasions, less likely for it to get wounded, to have these small cuts that would make the person or the one prone of getting STIs. But when it comes to anal sex, so our anus, they're very sensitive to the point that even a small penetration can cause it to bleed, and have like minor cuts. So with that, with the exposure, it's because anuses are not really built for sex, isn't it? So it's built for defecating, for us to pass our waste through there. But with that, you can still use it for pleasure though when it comes to homosexual relationships. With that being said, whatever your sexual orientation may be, you can still get really any negative health repercussions. So again, I'd like to prioritize safety once again.
What I'm hearing is that there is equal opportunity for everyone to try it, and there is equal negative effects for them. So it just depends on what your preferences are, really. That's what I'm hearing. From what I understood, safety comes from your own knowledge for yourself. It doesn't have to accommodate other people, but you have to know your needs first before you enter in that kind of activity. Well, actually, that was the last question for this interview, Keanu. But do you have any important words for our audience?
To end this talk, I just like to leave a message for everyone. So it's very simple, and I'll say it both in English and in our in Cebuano. So always remember that to say no to risky behaviors can always lead you to a better tomorrow. In Bisaya, ang pagbalibad sa butang nga makadaot, maayong kaugmaon ang makabot. So this is me, Keanu, saying that for each and every listeners that we have to this podcast, and hopefully you are able to apply the learnings that we were able to share today. And always remember, sex is okay, sex is good, sex is beneficial, so long as you prioritize your safety as well. That is all.
So definitely, to say no to risky behaviors can also lead you to a better tomorrow. And yes, sex is definitely safe as long as you know how to be safe and to protect yourself also. So on that note, thank you so much, Keanu, for taking the time out of your really busy schedule, especially with different time zones, to be with us for this episode and for giving us new and wise learnings about safe sexual intercourse, the ABCDEs of sex, and sexual education in general. These discoveries about our reproductive health will definitely be useful to everyone listening and to the general public. So once again, thank you so much for these, Sir Keanu.
You're welcome, and thank you also for having me. And I'm looking forward to the output of this podcast.
As we're on the topic of reproductive health, did you know that the birth canal is muscular? I didn't know that.
Me too. And I'm a nurse.
Well, actually, the walls of the tract are made up of an outer layer of smooth muscles called fibrous adventitia and an inner mucous membrane layer that has fold-like structures called rugae. These layers allow the stretching and expansion of the vagina during childbirth, and that expansion is like the size of a grapefruit. Wow! So imagine what your mother has gone through to bring you into this world. Thus, we should all take some time to thank our mothers for bringing us into this world and for the sacrifices they made, because childbirth is definitely one life-changing experience.
Yes. As we draw to a close this insightful and very enlightening episode, let's always keep in mind to always educate ourselves, especially for sex, because it's not taboo, and it'll only be taboo if we keep them in the dark. So always choose education above anything else.
That's right, Michael. We appreciate everyone's interest in tuning in till the end. Don't forget to like and follow the Rota Club of Cebu Fuente, University of San Carlos on Facebook, at RACCF USC on Instagram, and RACCF USC on YouTube. PB Besties, don't miss us too much, as we'll catch you all next time as we tackle another topic that'll hold a special place in our hearts.
See you around, B Besties!
Bye!